Hi guys, my name's Jim and welcome to Six String Studies. Today we're looking at the bend technique, or how to do string bending on the guitar, and the correct way of doing it, and also some of the problems that people find when they start trying to do this technique, and what to avoid when you start doing this technique. But before we get to the lesson, if this is your first time here, welcome. I would invite you to subscribe and hit that bell notification button so you don't miss any lessons. Also check out Six String Studies Book 1, that's a free download for you. And if you like that, check out Six String Studies Book 2 and 3, and I'll leave a link in the description for those. Let's get to the lesson. Okay, bends. So the first thing to talk about here is that when we are trying to execute a bend, we are not going to do it, initially at least, with only one finger. We're going to use 2 or 3 fingers on the same string, not necessarily the same fret, but they've got to be bunched together so that they are forming one giant finger, if you like. Okay, you're right against the fret wire here of this 7th fret, which we're going to bend here. So I'm going to play this. Now there is a little bit of bend from the fingers, but most of it comes from the wrist bone here at the back, which you're going to push towards the headstock whilst keeping your arm in, not this sort of thing. So not this, but this. Have a look from this angle. I'm going to try and show you that the wrist bone here is heading towards the headstock. So I'm going to do the bend. It's kind of like a turn of the wrist, like almost like you're kind of opening a door. Alright, so remember the elbow is not flapping about, it's being held here against, I mean not stiffly, you're comfortable, but it's not being raised like this. And you'll notice the way that the wrist bone is heading towards the headstock. Okay, so if I'm bending, I'm looking to get to certain pitches. We'll start with what we call a half step bend, or a 1 fret bend, semitone bend. We're going from the 7th fret here, and our target pitch is the 8th fret. So you've got to hear that note in your head and stop when you get to it. Now that takes a little bit of practice, but it's just the way it is. Okay, what about going a bit further? What about a whole step bend, or also called a full bend? We're going to bend 2 semitones, or a tone in pitch here. So this is my starting pitch, and I'm trying to get to here. Also notice the thumb is on top here. It's not down the back, none of this sort of thing, as you run out of power. This is acting as kind of your anchor point. So we got a half bend, a full bend. What about a 1.5 bend? Or a 2 bend? Or even a 2.5. Pretty hard to do those ones. So things to avoid when we're doing bends. If you just do nothing but the fingers here, you're going to run out of power, and you'll find you'll come off, you'll flick off like that. If you have your thumb on the back of the neck rather than holding on, you'll find that your fingers either go over the strings, that sort of thing, or worse, if I can even do it, they'll go under the strings. Like that sort of thing. You get trapped like that. So you're trying to push the strings out the way. Okay, if people try this with one finger, they get stuck because the strength isn't there yet. Downwards not too bad, but still quite hard to do. So initially 3 fingers, or at least 2 fingers. I tend to suggest 3 fingers, but as long as they're all working together. So we've got the different sort of pitches we can get to. That's one sort of bend. What about things like pre-bends, where we bend up and pick downwards? This comes with experience, knowing where your target bend is going to be. So I know it's going to be here. But also it depends on the fact that my wrist bone feels correct at this point. So I know it's going to be a whole step bend, rather than just guessing it. That takes a bit of practice. So you've got your basic bend and your pre-bend. There are lots of other sorts of bends. There's things like exchange bends and that sort of thing. One thing I did want to mention though is that as you come down on a bend, a lot of people have this dying off sound. I think it's because you're so happy that you got to the actual bend, the fingers relax a little bit. Alright, if that's the case, press harder on the way down. Okay, and lastly, you may have noticed that I've been putting some vibrato on some of these bends. Don't worry about that for the moment. It's pretty tricky to do. Slowly it would be like this. But people, when they start this, tend to get what I call the dying wasp sound. Sounds like this as the pitch comes down. So if you're going to do it, slow it down and listen to the pitches. There we are. So there you go, guys. That was bending and the correct way of doing it. Hopefully you got something out of that. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, check out the books, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.